This is a meeting of the Township Committee, March 2nd, 2015. The notice requirements provided for in the Open Public Meetings Act have been satisfied. Notice of this meeting was properly given by transmission to the Star Ledger, the Independent, and the Courier Times, and by posting at the Middletown Township Municipal Building and filing with the Township Clerk on January 9th, 2015. Committeeman Keeling.
Here.
Committeeman Sharpenberger.
Here. Committeeman
Green.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Massad.
Here.
Mayor May. Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence to honor the troops serving worldwide, defending our freedoms, constitutions, and way of life. Thank you. The first item on tonight's agenda, we have a presentation by the National Park Service on the Fort Hancock redevelopment plan.
Good evening. My name is Pete McCarthy. I'm the unit coordinator out at Sandy Hook. We were out here about a year ago to speak a little bit about our REF5, which was the original, our original intent to find out what people wanted to do out at Sandy Hook in regards to taking a shot at doing some restoration and some leasing at the Officers Row up in the Fort Hancock area of the park. We've made a little bit of progress in the past year, and what we wanted to do is come this evening and give you all an update. John Warren, who's our External Affairs Officer, is going to do most of the presentation here, and Superintendent Jen Ursessian and I are here to answer any questions you might have after John's presentation.
So, okay. First of all, thanks to everyone. Thanks for allowing us to speak here tonight, and thank you all in the room for listening. The National Park Service, of course, is located here at Sandy Hook. That is a unit of Gateway National Recreation Area. We're very proud to be here on the Jersey coast, and we hope that you enjoy having a national park so close to you. We think that this is a mutually beneficial relationship, and it's one that I certainly enjoy when I drive all the way from Trenton to come to this part of the state. It's quite beautiful. As you know, we have historic buildings at Fort Hancock, and they're in a state of deterioration. We need to be able to preserve them, but we don't have the funds to do that, so we have to look to creative ways, to new ways to do that. We also realized that we know our buildings, but we don't necessarily know everything, and it would help if we had a federal advisory committee. And so one was formed a few years ago by the Interior Secretary, who at the time was Ken Salazar. This committee has met 15 times in 25 months. That's a pretty busy record for the committee, and it's made up of local citizens, also content experts and elected officials here in this area to advise the park on the best ways to utilize these historic buildings, which are beautiful and the structures are strong, but the interiors obviously need some work. And they've been incredibly helpful. They've given us a lot of ideas, and they helped us craft in late 2013 a request for expressions of interest. We in the government love initials, so an RFEI is what we call this. This is not something where you commit to actually leasing a building. It's something where you say, I've got an idea, let me explain it to you. And so we got 41 written responses from this in late 2013. More than 200 people attended our open houses. There was a full-page article in the front page, not on the front page, but in the first section of the New York Times. It got a lot of buzz. And the two responses that where we got half of all written responses were the residential use and bed and breakfast. Also, these responses pointed in a certain direction for us. They told us not just what people were interested in, what the market might be, but also where they might want to locate. For example, people in residences didn't want to necessarily be next to a bed and breakfast. It might be noisy. So that led us to the development, organically, of a land use map, which is seen here. These would be bed and breakfasts. over here on this side. By the way, the ferry is here. This is the chapel. Chapel is very busy. It gets used every weekend through the spring, summer, and fall. It's already booked up for 2015. We're looking at 2016 dates now. So that's a good place for bed and breakfasts. Over here, in the red and blue, we have residences. The red residences have an option for having an office as well as a residence. This is the famous officers' row. So what you have here is the bay. You're overlooking the bay during the sunset. It's a terrific view. Not many of those left in such pristine places. And back here, where the Army had built several buildings such as barracks for enlisted men, mess halls, and YMCAs and other buildings like that, here we have an area for organizations, especially not-for-profit organizations, and that's our land use map at the moment. It will change, but this is what we're going by right now. And that helped us to develop what's going on now. From late December through Friday, April 17th, these requests for proposal, RFPs, these will be open. And we're not trying to lease all those buildings at once, because that might be a little too ambitious. We want to learn very carefully, and so we're leasing 2 bed and breakfasts. We're leasing 2 residences and 2 buildings for not-for-profits. It could be any of the 2 buildings that you saw in the land use map back here. It could be any of these 2. It could be any of these 2. The bed and breakfasts, though, it's going to be building 6 and building 27. So that's where we're going right now with the mixed use that we foresee as building, or actually rebuilding, a new community in Fort Hancock. Fort Hancock used to have thousands of people living and working there. We maybe don't want thousands of people at this point. I don't know if we could sustain that, but we definitely can rebuild a viable and vital and vibrant community at Fort Hancock. So we start again with not-for-profit entities, bed and breakfast, residential, and as you see here, we're putting some skin in the game. We're putting some money into Building 7 and rehabilitating that. The reason that we're doing that is because when you do lease a building, you're going to have to follow the Interior Secretary's standards for historic rehabilitation. These buildings are historic buildings. We don't want to see something that intrudes on the historic landscape or that does violence to the historic integrity of these wonderful buildings. So the outside is going to have to look right, and the inside needs to be done correctly. We've actually started doing that with Buildings 7 and 17, where we brought in and restored the porches. You can see on this one, this has a nice brand new porch made within the last year. Just imagine if once they all look like that. Now, during this period, we're gathering people who are filling in requests for proposals, potential leaseholders, and once those are gathered, they will be evaluated by people in the National Park Service. Not, however, by Superintendent Nersessian, or B. McCarthy, or me. They will be evaluated by an NPS team outside of the park. So there's no conflict there. The criteria that we're evaluating them on shows what the values of the park are towards filling these wonderful buildings. Financial is larger than the rest because we want to make sure that you actually do have the money to be able to restore these buildings. But you see, preservation is a very close second. The buildings need to be done the right way. Experience in working with historic structures is important. If you've done a bed and breakfast before, that's a good thing. Sustainability, use, and rent also show up, but you can see rent is only 5%. We're not in this to make money. We're in this to save buildings. And as I mentioned before, it's a pilot phase. So we're looking for pioneers right now. And that's going to give us a lot of information in a very short time. It's going to tell us what our infrastructure demands really are. It'll tell us whether or not the land use map that we have right now needs to have some zones shrink or grow or change. It's going to help us work out Americans with Disabilities Act issues of egress, And we'll also have to be able to staff this future community because at the moment we don't take care of something like this. So this pilot phase is going to demonstrate early success so that later on we can guide future development with many more buildings. So some important dates that are coming up. Site tours are by appointment only. Call me, I'm glad to show you the buildings. You need to wear sturdy shoes first, and we'll make you wear a hard hat. Questions that will go into a frequently asked questions that we can give to everybody. The deadline for that will be Monday, March 16th. This is something that the National Park Service does with all such leases so that we can answer everyone's question the same way and be equitable in that way. Again, proposals are due 2 days after tax day, Friday, April 17th, with the anticipated date for selection by the team from the National Park Service about 5 weeks after submittal. And then anticipated lease commencement will be subject to negotiation. There is a negotiation phase after that. So those are the very bare details of what we're doing to bring Fort Hancock back, to reawaken it, to revive it into the community that it used to be and that it can be again. This is a community that will not only be good for the park because it will preserve buildings, but it will add to the overall flavor of this area. These are people who will be coming into Middletown for dinner, like we did at Panera. And these are people who will enrich our lives in many ways that can also add to the community in ways such as enhancement of the arts and so many other ways that make our lives richer and better. This is where I step back and see if you have any questions that we would be glad to answer, either Pete or Jen.
Thank you, John.
A couple of questions for you. What's the lease length that you're anticipating receiving on average? This is not a 5-year lease, this is a 20 or 30 year.
We can go up to 60, and it'll depend on negotiation.
Okay.
But we have it's a minimum of 10
Right.
and a maximum of 60.
Okay. Based on your review of all the buildings, what's your average repair cost range in order of magnitude?
High, 1.6, low, about 800,000.
Per building?
Yes.
Yes.
Let me be more specific. If you look at the residential component, where's that order of magnitude?
I'd say probably on the average anywhere between 1.2 and 1.4.
To renovate these residential
Yes.
Yeah.
per building.
Yeah.
Yes. The exteriors, you know, the Army knew how to build buildings. They made them solid. They brought in dirt from other places because building on sand is a little problematic. So the structures are sound, but the interiors are not. And you can find those on, we have a Flickr website, you can see those. Someone's starting a question.
And John, if I may add, the length of the lease will be determined by the level of investment one makes in the building. So, you know, if you put 1.4 million into the building to preserve it, that all comes off the top of
It's
whatever
all
you would
amortized.
pay in lease. So you could have up to 60 years of free rent, depending on how much money you invest into the building.
So with respect to the residential, are you looking at potential leases of residential single-family, multi-unit? What's the scope and magnitude? Can you give me more clarification and definition on your residential buildings and what type of residential setting you will allow?
They're set up as single-family homes. However, we haven't made a full determination on that yet. You know, in order to keep the historic fabric and character, we're going to have to stay pretty close to that.
So you wouldn't rule out multifamily?
At this point, you know, we're looking for guidance from the Federal Advisory Committee on where that'll go next.
So let me give you a little guidance from Middletown, who would bear the brunt of this here a little bit. But the guidance being that ultimately, unlike, and I know we're going to serve on the committee briefly, and I know we have representation, but my concern with multifamily is impact to, because obviously this is part of Middletown,
Yes.
from a district perspective.
Of course, yeah.
Impact to our school district, impact to our service needs, including, not including fire or EMS, whatever else it can be. So I personally understand. I mean, it looks like a large portion of this, and the map is residential, and my concern would be someone coming in for, $1.4 million and creating multi-apartments, which ultimately will add to our infrastructure costs.
Sure.
Will not have an impact to Seabright, will not have an impact to Highland.
Of course not, no.
So I would advocate very strongly for single family and not multifamily purchase.
What's the square footage range of the residential?
Somewhere around 7,500 on the average.
Lieutenant's quarters are
That's why I'm
7,412 square
concerned about
feet.
subdivision.
And I would be too, sure.
Honestly, the layout of the floor layout does not lend itself to that kind of use. They were built as single-family dwellings with, an area for servants at the top. That's really how they're structured. There aren't enough bathrooms to be able to accommodate that. They were originally only built to have one bathroom, and that was on the second, well, no, two. One on the second, one on the third floor.
Stay with the historic standards, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so
I
it would
don't
be
think we-
very
and-
hard. I
Right.
can't imagine it
Good.
personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be more concerned with your barracks type quarters that you probably have for non-for-profits that you're looking at, 'cause I did tour the facility
Yes,
in the past.
sure.
And you have some very much larger buildings than these, single family.
Yeah.
And my concern would be more with them in terms of a switch, as you mentioned, when you see your RFI, when you see
Yeah,
your
sure.
indications of interest, a switch from maybe we make this more residential and this more for the not. It's very simple to say, if I'm a developer and I have this huge barracks here and I can subdivide that into apartments, to say, let me make that residential and let the non-for-profit go in a single-family house. That's my concern
And
with
it's a
that
legitimate
design.
concern. What we really want to make sure that folks understand is the reason that we went with the Federal Advisory Committee was to get input from everybody. It's very important that we get input from you guys. That's why we're out here talking to you. And one of the things as we moved forward with this, with the pilot program, was we wanted to see how we would manage this and how we would come out of it. There had been debate on two sides of the street in regards to a master development scheme. And one of the things that we were concerned about was the fact that we wanted to be consistent. And again, you had brought up that point where what if you had to switch in use, and we kind of want to make sure that we stay, that we're staying on top of that.
There are only 10 buildings that are set aside for residential use in the plan as it is now. And the barracks are not in that zone. They are in the other zone. So it's hard to imagine that that would change.
Question, Jerry?
Yeah, I know we had spoken about this, and I'm going to bring it up here while the administrator's here. If there's residential buildings that are technically in Middletown,
Yes.
how does that work with property tax revenues? Do they pay property taxes?
Well, I think this came up a long time ago when the first redevelopment plan was discussed, that there is some provision to allow for negotiated, almost like a payment in lieu of tax arrangement with the National Park Service. So that would have to be something that would be negotiated down for the whole complex, not just for the residential part, for everything.
Let's see Charlie get comps for these, huh?
He'll do it. I have a question. Assuming full build out, let's assume Nirvana and everything gets filled up and everything is occupied along the lines of what your concept is here. Or have you looked at your infrastructure in terms of sanitary sewer capacity, water, all those things as to whether or not they are sufficient, or will there need to be capital improvements or upgrades to those things?
We're doing full capital improvement on our sewer plant. We're at a juncture where it was either fish or cut bait in regards to what we were doing on the rehabilitation. We decided to cut bait. We'll be able to get by with our volume for the next 2 years on temporary repairs. However, we're going to a new sewer plant, which will be able to maximize our capacity on that. We had built the original sewer plant in the 90s, or rebuilt the original sewer plant in the 90s, with the idea that the Coast Guard was fully occupied. The Coast Guard is abandoned, for lack of a better word, they've abandoned residential on Sandy Hook, and they've actually gone out to the community. So what the Coast Guard's capacity is, we had that built in with redevelopment before, so we have a little extra at this point. JCP&L seems to feel the same way in regards to our capacity with electric power. And our water system was built for, you know, a community of 10,000 people.
Do you provide your own water?
Yes, we have our own water plant, our own water well. Our backup is New Jersey American.
And we're in the process of installing a whole new telecommunications trunk of Sandy Hook as well. So that'll be taking place over the next year or so.
So full build out, you have adequate capacity for
Yes.
all your basic infrastructure?
Yes. And then on a case-by-case basis, it'll be interesting to see how the buildings themselves do with what they have.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time, I really appreciate it. Okay.
Yes. And there are no
we would have to, how do you get a bank for finance? So there's no security. You know, there's no security. That's the tricky part.
it is also.
It is. Well, what it would have to be negated, that has to be worked out. It's more complicated. Fine, if you're not paying.
Thank you very much.
7,000 square foot house, if it were to you, would be a lot of money.
Well, it can go anywhere.
Well, we talked about that, it's just, you're not
So if you want, you can't sell it.
no, it's not, you can't buy it.
Can you sublease it?
No, you have to negotiate. You'd have to have some term in there with all the persons, they would probably say, the person's qualified. So, yeah. They would have to all, approve.
Our next item on tonight's agenda, we have no action items. We have a public hearing on ordinance number 2015-3126, an ordinance granting renewal of municipal consent to Comcast of New Jersey to construct, connect, operate, and maintain cable, television, and communication systems in the Township of Middletown.
Anyone wishing to speak to 2015-3126? Yes, Mr. Watson.
Hi, my name's Don Watson, living at 1 Collinson Drive in New Monmouth. And I was reading through this ordinance here and had a few questions. And one was, I noticed in the bill list that we pay Verizon for our telephone service. Is there any reason why we can't use Comcast since we have a free internet connection to every building in the township?
We pay Verizon for a variety of different things. We also use Comcast. We use a lot of different communications carriers. It depends on what the need is. And our IT director is the one who evaluates, each one and what they offer and what we need from them.
Okay. I see on the bill list it says phone service that we're using for Verizon.
Yeah, we use Verizon for our phone service, that's right.
Is there any reason why we shouldn't use Comcast since we get a free internet connection to every building in town?
Yeah, the answer to that?
Comcast does not allow free internet service to any of the township buildings. They have never offered it. We've continued to hit their basically higher-ups, and they do not offer it to any of the municipality buildings. Verizon, that is part of the state mandate when they came in the franchise agreement. They are to provide files to anywhere there is a files connection to.
No, Comcast.
Comcast does not do that. Until Comcast comes in under the state franchise agreement, they do not provide free service to any one of our buildings for internet service.
If you read this ordinance here in section 14, clause B, it says that you get one outlet to each qualified existing and future public building, including the municipal building, and it says at no charge.
That's part of it. Then once they get into the state franchise agreement, that's not.
That's basic. That's basic. That's a single basic cable connection. That's all that is.
It's not internet.
Todd, wouldn't you also lose every municipal phone number because Verizon owns the phone numbers and Comcast doesn't necessarily get the opportunity to port them over? Which is
To an extent, yes, you would. That is actually true.
What's that?
You would lose certain phone numbers because basically Comcast Verizon will not allow certain phone numbers to be ported over.
Exchange 615 is one of them.
Yes, it will. That is correct.
That's why I can't change my
Yes.
home phone.
Yep. And Verizon has that ability to basically restrict any type of porting over.
Right.
But basically, internet service, I've been dealing with Comcast for 13 years.
Since you've been here.
Comcast will not give us free service. I have been banging on basically, but unfortunately, FiOS is not available at every one of our buildings. And basically, so wherever we have it, we're going to use it.
And even though it says basic cable service means...
Basic cable service is not internet. Basic cable service is basically the $14.95 package a month. Basically, it gives you channels 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, and that's pretty much it.
Well, this says it means any service tier, which includes retransmission of local television broadcast signals.
That's not internet.
Not internet.
That's not internet. Internet basically runs over a different frequency, so it's not internet signal.
Okay.
Okay?
Great, thanks,
No
Todd.
problem.
Don't go away.
I'm not.
I might have a couple other questions. It also mentions here a $125,000 grant. Do we have any plans to use what we're going to use that grant for?
$125,000 grant for
From Comcast.
For when?
It says,
I'm not aware of any
We
grant.
get if I may, Mayor.
Yes, please.
The
6 months after the
ordinance
issuance.
provides, yes, the ordinance provides for a grant within 6 months of the renewal certificate being approved by the Board of Public Utilities. This is not dissimilar to the grant that was provided in 1999, the last time this reauthorization was done. That can be used under the law and under the ordinance for the purposes therein authorized, and just for any of those purposes and nothing else.
Thank you.
meets the technology and/or cable-related needs of the community.
Correct. There's also some regulatory standards for that as well, but yes.
So are there any plans?
We haven't made any plans yet. We haven't discussed what we're going to utilize that for. We'll wait
Okay.
till
When do
we
you-
know when we're going to get it.
What's that?
We'll wait till we are confident when we're going to receive
In
it.
6 months?
Yeah.
The
Okay.
BP is still back.
Excuse me?
It'll probably be more than 6 months, but the BPU...
It says within 6 months.
After the BPU issues its certificate of renewal, which will take place sometime after
Right.
this ordinance is legally adopted, we'll more likely be closer to a year or so.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Are there any plans, like in Section 15, Clause E, it says that you can use this for the purpose of showing the public local government at work. Are there any plans to use our Comcast service to show our local government at work? Does anybody have an answer to that?
We have a channel now that we put programming on, and we periodically discuss, different types of programming to show on there, and so we already utilize that. It's not a government access channel. It's not a channel where anyone can just put programming on there. It has to be through us, and it has to be
Right.
educational, municipal related.
And it shows the local government at work?
That is something we can do, yes.
So that's what I'm asking, is there plans to do that?
We have no
We already
plans
do,
right
we
now.
already
You have
do.
no plans to do anything like that?
Right now, we don't even have.
Wait a minute, you're confusing government with township committee at work, so let's
I'm just, it says
keep,
public.
let's not play semantics, right? So
No,
we
we're not
show
playing
government-
semantics.
we
It
show
says-
we show government at work on the municipal access channel every time through programming, through messaging, through communications. It's not on right now, but, so there is programming all the time, which is basically the government at work. It's, saying government at work meaning your government officials at work versus government at work, so it's hard, I would challenge to say that we don't have government at work on our community access channel.
Right, okay. So do you plan to show the governing body at work on our cable television
You're asking if
station?
we're going to show governing body meetings? No, we're not.
No.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to 2015-31-26? Yes.
Yes, I would. Linda Bound, 19 May Court. And I would also like to speak to some of the provision for the $125,000 grant in the, listed in the ordinance. We all know about the $200,000 grant that was listed in ordinance, was 99-2566. And after looking into that a little bit, we found out, well, that was not listed in the budgets for around that period, 99, 2000, 2001. It was listed in, I think, the audit for 2000. And on December 15th, Rob Clifton was here for Comcast and claimed that that money was given to Middletown in the year 2000. And the audit does list it for that year. And I think so that happened pretty quickly. We talk about the timing of receiving this money for one thing. It should be well within a year based on the receipt of those prior monies. The $200,000 grant was brought up many times with this committee, this administration, and nobody really knew anything about it. Granted, it was a long time ago, but I've also put in requests for records documenting receipt of the monies and was told that there were no responsive records. So supposedly it was received. We may never know how it was used. We now have a second shot at doing something really productive with that money. Many towns video record their local government meetings. And I think there's really no reason why a town as large as Middletown can't. This is a town where it could take 20 minutes or half an hour to get from one end of the town to another. And I think also that we shouldn't, there is a large sector of the population that, is not reached. People that don't necessarily have internet access, can't access videos online, and does not get newspapers, maybe because of the cost. And a lot of these people are our seniors, as one example. And I think the only way to reach them, or that they can be informed, is through the one place that they're actually looking for information, and that's television. And there's a lot that's listed in the slides that you provide that doesn't really tell people everything that's going on, the various ordinances, resolutions, things like that. So I think that it's an important thing to do to actually video record these local government meetings for the public. And I don't think we should be thinking about it as, we should be treating it like an extra discretionary expense, because I think it's an integral responsibility of government to do that. Many other towns do it. Really, in a town as large as Middletown, I think there's really no excuse not to. We have the money, we have the technical ability, and we really just need the will to do it. And I hope to encourage you to do that. And I guess that is my comment for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak to 2015-31-26? See no other members of the public wishing to speak to 2015-31-26, and move to close the public portion. Ms. Alves.
Second.
Committeeman Fury.
Yes.
Committeeman Sharpenberger.
Yes.
Committeeman Sedambrino.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Michelle.
Yes.
Mayor Murray.
Yes.
Motion carries to adopt ordinance 2015-3126 on second and final reading. Our next item on tonight's agenda, we have introduction of ordinance 2015-3131, an ordinance amending section 16-826E of the Code of the Township of Middletown governing electronic message center EMC signs. Motion to introduce.
Second.
Committeeman Fury.
Yes.
Committeeman Schaffenberg.
Yes.
Committeeman Sedambrino.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Massell.
Absolutely.
Mayor Murray.
Yes.
Motion carries to pass this ordinance on first reading. Public hearing will be held March 16th. March 16th?
Yes.
2015. Our next item on tonight's agenda, we have introduction of ordinance 2015-3132, an ordinance amending sections 4-25 and 4-50 of the Code of the Township of Middletown governing custody and management of the township owned property and the duties of the Director and the Department of Public Safety. Committeeman Fury.
Yes.
Committeeman Schaffenberg.
Yes.
Committeeman Sedambrino.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Massell.
Yes.
Mayor Murray.
Yes.
Motion carries past this ordinance on first reading with a public hearing to be held March 16, 2015. At this time, we have the payment of bills. Resolution 15-103, payment of bills for March 2nd, 2015. Committeeman Fury.
Yes.
Committeeman Schaffenberger.
Yes.
Committeeman Sedambrino.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Massell.
Yes.
Mayor Murray.
Yes.
Motion carries to adopt this resolution 15-103. At this time, I'd like to ask the Township Committee to consider a consent agenda, which would include resolutions 15-104 through 15-113, and approval of amendments to raffle applications. Committeeman Fury.
Yes.
Committeeman Schaffenberger.
Yes.
Committeeman Sedambrino.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Massell.
Yes.
Mayor Murray.
Yes.
Motion carries to adopt the consent agenda. Agenda items for March 16th will include presentation of life-saving awards to Leonardo First Aid members Jack Houston and Roy Williams, proclamation declaring April 2015 Autism Awareness Month in Middletown Township, a proclamation declaring April 12th through 18th, 2015 as National Volunteer Week in Middletown Township, and a proclamation declaring April 2015 as Alcohol Awareness Month in Middletown Township. We'll have approval of minutes. We have public hearing of proposed ordinances. Ordinance 2015-3127, an ordinance establishing measures to protect dunes and beaches. We have 2015-3128, an ordinance amending section 127-24AA of the Township Code for summer recreation program fees. Ordinance 2015-3129, an ordinance amending section 44 of the Township Code governing special duty rates for police officers. And 2015-3130, an ordinance regulating parking of commercial vehicles and trailers on municipal roadways in residential areas. We'll have a consent agenda, which will include resolutions being on raffle applications and volunteer firefighter applications. For tonight's discussion, we have resolution authorizing deed of easement for detention basin and conservation easement for block 825, lot 2.21, and lot 2.05. We have resolution authorizing conservation easement swap request, block 982, lot 8.04, 605 Martin's Lane. We have resolution for Monmouth County Mutual Aid Agreement, supplemental police protection. We have a release of performance guarantee to the Village of Chapel Hill. Release of Ocean Heights Performance Guarantee, Registrar of Vital Statistics fee amendment, purchasing aquatic vegetation management at Shadow Lake DPW.
Yeah, Mayor. Every year, this time of the year, we do this for aquatic vegetation management. If I'm not mistaken, it is when we hire the chemical, Ted, correct me if I'm wrong, the chemical application to Shadow Lake, which is effective for a mitigated time period based on water chestnuts. I had the opportunity with Ted to take a boat trip out on Shadow Lake last year and see exactly what the issues, in my view, were. And one of the things that I was most striking to me is the effect that the hydro raking had on the lake. The problem is that the hydro raking is costly for the amount of area that we discussed, that we were able to utilize. I think we spent $80,000 last year, if that number sounds correct. It could be a little bit higher.
A little bit less.
A bit less, but we made, and we got however many square
acres.
Right, and it had a very big impact. So I'll ask this question that I asked last year, and I'll ask it again, which is, why are we not considering buying a hydro rake, which we could do much more than 4 potential acres of, which would ultimately has shown to be highly successful in this vegetation process, and from what I understand is a cost of probably $200,000 less.
Well, the answer is we are actually considering that. This is for the bid for the herbicidal treatment.
Which I would not stop.
And which would be one application in the spring. This also includes in this bid package the hydro raking, which is part of our normal.
But why pay for hydro raking when we can acquire a hydro rake and do even more if we get the training?
We might not. It'll just be part of this bid package. It's an option we don't have to go. We don't have to commit to. And as part of our capital discussions, Colleen and Tony and I have brought up the idea of purchasing the hydro rake machine as well. So if that does come to fruition through our capital discussions and through your approval, we're still looking at the actual machines. That portion of this bid would not be applied, obviously.
I mean, and I appreciate it. Depending on what the hydro rake costs, and not to put the cart before the horse. And believe me, I don't want to spend any more capital than needs to be required. But you're going to spend $60,000 or $70,000 on hydro raking for square whatever cubic yards or however it's cubic yards of this stuff. And you can acquire one that you can have somebody all summer out there chopping through these things. To me, unless the cost is $500,000 on this hydro rake, it just seems that we're just throwing money away, exercising that part of the purchasing agreement. So,
Ed, do we have personnel who can operate it?
Well, yeah, we do. We have operators who would be able to do that. It's fairly simple.
right. Now, obviously, the issue is getting out there. You got to figure out.
Yeah, there are some components. There's a conveyor belt system nearby where you bring it over, but we've had that as well.
I just think we need to really do a cost-benefit analysis as to the capital versus what we're expending here for hydro rating services, because it clearly has been effective.
The other potential benefit to buying, to having our own piece of equipment is that we can also do it for Parks Pond. Parks Pond is in terrible shape, and probably worse than Shadow Lake. It just doesn't have many residents who look over it.
And there's some other smaller ponds.
Yeah, and there's other places around town that we can utilize, but that one for sure.
But I'm just fairly confident that, I mean, again, if this thing is so expensive that it doesn't make economic sense, then that's the case.
They're not that expensive.
But I'm fairly confident, we, you know, you and I looked at, if somebody spent 4 weeks going on Shadow Lake and just going through, that whole lake would be clear.
Yeah. Right. Well, they did 4 acres in a week, a little over a week, so the contractor did.
And it's all on that one, it's all, the lake is only, despite what people may say, and I could tell you firsthand, it's really just the western edge. I mean, you got some on the corners where trees have fallen, but it's really the western edge that's the...
We're going to have a capital discussion.
I only bring that up because you got part of the agreement
chomping
here.
at the bit to get to that discussion.
And again, that part of the herbicidal treatment has to get in by the end of May to be effective, so we're trying to push that.
I think we have to do that every spring.
Right.
We do.
You just have to do that.
We do.
Not twice a year,
It's
just
the
once.
second part of it that I just want to address while I have the
I agree.
opportunity to address.
Okay, yeah, one thing, and I've spoken to a few of the folks individually about this, I was hoping that we could adopt a resolution in support of New Jersey Resources Southern Reliability Link Pipeline Project. And this is a project that would help to harden the infrastructure. Some of it was damaged in Sandy, and guarantee delivery of vital fuel to New Jersey. So one of the representatives from NJR had explained the project, and I think it's a great project, and I think it's going to serve everybody very well. So I'm going to distribute a resolution for consideration to everybody before the next meeting, and hopefully we can adopt it then. So if anybody has any questions, I know enough about it probably to answer the most basic questions, but it's a transmission line. It's not individual, but it serves a tremendous number of people in the area and various counties around.
Okay, we have Township, any comments?
I have no comments this evening, Mayor.
Nothing this evening, Mayor, thank you.
You all stand by. Very quickly, I just want to say what a great project I think the Sandy Hook initiative is. Having spent many years out there, in fact, after I go, I'm going to split my time haunting Sandy Hook and Old First Church. But it is, the buildings are great, and I'm hopeful that I'll be appointed to, and you too, I think, for both of them, for the committee, and Tony. So it is good. It is a heavy.
Are you being held up by the DHS?
Somewhere in DC, somewhere between here and DC, it's being held up. But it looks like it's going forward, and I think in the next couple of weeks get the word. But yeah, but they are impressive buildings. It would be tragic to have them collapse, through age and neglect. So but that's all I have to say.
Deputy Mayor. I have no comments either tonight. So, with that, I think we're going to open up to public portion. So is there anyone who would like to make a remark for the record?
I do.
Okay, Ms. Mel.
Two comments. One is regarding the Shadow Lake bid process. I did see that in the Two River Times that the bids are due next week. And last year, I think I attended the bid opening, and I asked about who received bid packages. And there were, I think that, due to the snow last year, maybe there's some delays in sending them out, but maybe they sent out maybe 3. And as I recall, the winning bidder, and I think it might have been the only bid received, if that's correct, and if it's not, you can correct me, but they were sent their bid package much sooner than the other entities. So I'm kind of wondering, who has received a bid package this year and when did they go out? Does anyone know?
Could I ask you a question? Are you speaking of a public bid process? Just so that what your question?
Last year, the bid process for the Shadow Lake hydro raking and herbicidal treatment.
Right, so it was a public bid process, right?
Anybody?
So it's advertised in the newspaper, and it's provided a minimum number of days by statute. And
I'm not saying that the township did anything illegally. I'm saying that there were several bid packages that were sent out that to people who had shown interest in the past, and there were 3 that went out. One went out a great deal sooner. When there's only a matter of days to respond, it went out considerably sooner than the other 2 packages. So I'm kind of wondering, do we know who sent a package this year?
It's done through our purchasing department, so I wouldn't know. I mean, it could be that someone requested one sooner than somebody else did.
That's usually the way it works. The interested party will request being on the list before the bid's actually out. So it's mailed out to them.
Okay. All right. I guess I could check, with Lynn and Ted. I know that at least one of the 3 packages that went out, one of the 2 later ones, there wasn't a specific request for it. It was based on, interest in the past. So they did learn about the bid, but they received the bid package in the mail about a day later, prior to actually requesting one. So that was my comment regarding that. And another comment, it has to do with Dr. Scharfenberg. You just mentioned proposed a resolution in support of a particular pipeline. What was that pipeline again? The name of it?
It was the Southern Reliability Link Pipeline Project. The operative word is reliability.
There's no acronym.
Okay, and now, You know, you said, you also commented that, you didn't know too much about it, maybe enough to answer a few basic questions. And I'm kind of wondering why, if you don't know that much about it, why you...
I said I knew enough about it to answer some basic questions.
Okay. I'm wondering if that's enough to actually responsibly propose a resolution for a township to support. I mean, shouldn't you know a little bit more about it?
No, and I'll correct you right there. I spoke to somebody, one of the principals, who walked me through every bit. I'm not that school where I can regurgitate everything I was told. So I was explained to it at length by one of the principals of the company. So I feel very confident, exceedingly confident in the resolution.
Who is, well, again, you're getting your information from a person who's interested in seeing the project go through. Isn't it possible you're not getting all the information, or it might be somehow slanted to support their cause?
That would be insulting Dr. Scharfenberger's intelligence, wouldn't it? It
No, I'm
certainly
saying
would,
that
because
there's...
you're saying
Or
that he
ours. We
wouldn't
wouldn't be able to make
wouldn't have the
any decision.
wherewithal to make his own decision on whether or not.
There's an awful lot of information floating around right now. There's a lot of information about these pipelines. There are different opinions. And often, depending which side of the argument you're on, if you want something built or you don't want it built, your arguments are going, if you want it built, their arguments are going to be in favor. And the information that they provide you is all going to be, organized in such a way that, isn't this great? Look at all that this does. But you're not necessarily going to be getting the whole picture, not from that particular person who is interested in development. So I would encourage this committee to, before adopting a resolution in support, to get full information, which means hearing arguments from both sides. A lot of the environmental organizations, they have very bright people working for them and they publish information on these things. And what you will find is that often what's discovered about the facts that are being circulated by those wishing to develop these things is that they're not entirely accurate. So I would ask you to please just gather additional information before making a decision to support.
And that's the beauty of a workshop meeting where I brought it up and now everybody has a chance to review it.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else wishing to make public comment? Yes, Mr. Watson.
Yes, Mr. Murray, my name's Don Watson. I live at 1 Collinson Drive in New Monmouth. And I was just wondering if Colleen could shed some light on if any checks were ever returned by the township. We adopted a resolution last meeting, or ordinance to lower the return check fees. And Mr. Nelson had said that you picked up on this because he didn't know anything about it. But I was wondering if you had noticed any checks that were returned by the township.
Any?
By the township?
The question is whether
we
the
collected any
township
fees.
collected any fees for return checks.
Oh.
That was the question, correct, Mr. Watson?
Since I've been here, I don't believe I've seen any return check fees. That was part of what I was looking at, was that there didn't seem to be an ordinance authorizing that, and then the couple that we had in different spots were not consistent. So we did it, I let every department head know that now we have that, and that when they have return checks from people, that we need to also charge that fee.
Otherwise, we bear the cost of the bank for it.
Right.
We
As it is, the fee we're allowed to charge doesn't cover the cost of the bank
We
charge.
do get return checks. It's not uncommon
Right.
for certain things.
But I don't know that fees have ever been
No.
charged.
No, there weren't. That was the issue.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much.
But we are charging.
Yeah.
Right, we are.
We are charging?
No, we are charging.
No, we're charged a fee from the bank,
Oh, right.
which is up and above what we're
Of course.
allowed to charge for those.
Right. Very good.
Anyone else wishing to make a public comment? Seeing no other members of the public wishing to make any public comments, I move to close public portion and
Committeeman Fiore. Committeeman Scharfenberger.
Yes.
Committeeman Sedambrino.
Yes.
Committeeman Mansell.
Yes.
Mayor Murray. Yes. Motion carries to adjourn.
Anybody have to set up the phone number again?
Yeah.